The most common mechanical problem, and probably the most frustrating to get in a ride, is getting a puncture. But today we're going to look at a few tips, little bike setup hacks and things you can buy to make them almost disappear. So this is how to avoid punctures. So number one, the first thing I recommend is going tubeless if you've not done already. So this is going to get rid of pinch punctures, sort of, but what it's really going to get rid of is getting a puncture through riding over something sharp like a thorn. So now, rather than going through the tyre and into the tube, actually you can have sealant inside that tyre, and that's going to roll around, and that is designed to fill those little gaps. So snake bites, that's what I'm talking about, pinch punctures. When you've got a tube inside that tyre and you hit an obstacle like a rock, it's actually going to bottom out that tyre and tube on the rim, and that's where you get that pinch. But without a tube, of course, you don't get that. However, you can still sort of get these snake bite tyres. If you hit the tyre really hard into an obstacle, you're actually going to damage that tyre. But it's much harder than actually pinching a tube, and there are ways to fix this. So the first way is to carry one of these plug kits. So if the rip is about the right size, they're brilliant, these kits. You can just stuff it in there and they last forever. They'll last a lifetime of that tyre. Of course, if they're too big, if it's anything more than a centimetre or two, then you're going to have to repair that tyre properly, but that is quite rare. Now, I always go to the higher end of what they recommend on the millilitres for the tyre size, but I just think it helps the tyre seal that bit better. And with more of this stuff sloshing around, yes, it's going to be heavier, but it's going to prevent punctures that little bit better. Also, not all tubeless sealant is equal. You'll find some cheaper brands, it just goes off much quicker and it's just thinner stuff. It doesn't fill the holes quite as well. If you're using tubes inside your tyres and you're regularly getting snake bite punctures, that is a pinch. What I would do is look inside your wheel and check your rim tape, because if it's damaged or there's any missing, actually the tube can get damaged on those spoke heads. So you can get proper cycle rim tape, or you can use gaffer tape, or my old favourite, electrical tape. Now, aside from tubeless, I think the next most important fix for getting less punctures is just to pump your tyres harder. Now, me and Steve actually had a really good chat with multiple world downhill champion Fabien Barel in France last winter, and he said that all downhill racers could avoid punctures if they just pump their tyres up to 60 psi. Of course, there's some truth in that, but that's not very practical because you're not going to get any grip of your tyres being that hard. So practically for most riders, I think a good tyre pressure range is somewhere between 18 and 30 psi. Most riders will probably find themselves happiest in the low 20s to high 20 psi's, but I found myself in certain situations on really rough tracks where I maybe haven't got a spare tube and I'll just pump my tyre up something like 32, maybe even up to 35 psi. It's definitely going to lower the performance of the tyre, but it might save me from getting abandoned in the middle of nowhere. So a great fix for avoiding punctures, but maybe not the most practical, is just to put more air in your tyres. However, I do think that heavier riders, and I'm talking about riding style as much as body weight, will want to go up to these higher pressures to try and avoid these pinch punctures, but that won't necessarily completely solve it. I think heavier riders might want to go to a tougher tyre, so let's do some tyre chat. If heavier riders are puncturing an awful lot with some cross-country tyres, what I would do is just get a tougher tyre with more sidewall support. So a lot of riders, even with 140mm travel or 160mm travel bikes, would benefit from running 2-ply downhill tyres. Personally, if I took this enduro bike, 170mm travel, to the Alps or somewhere like Whistler where there's lots of braking bumps, lots of rocks, I would chuck on some 2-ply downhill tyres. The rest of the time, I'm happy with my trail tyres. Right, let's talk TPI, threads per inch. So this is Continental's downhill tyre, so the top of the range, the toughest tyre they make, 27.5 by 2.4. So we've got layers of nylon casing in here, and the more threads per inch, the tougher it is. And underneath this tyre, we've got 6 layers of 360 thread per inch nylon casing. And on the side, let me look at my notes, we've got 4 layers of 240. So it's the toughest tyre they make, but it's also the heaviest. It's 1,300 grams just for one. So now we're going to the Kaiser project, so a lighter tyre. Same tread as you see on the downhill tyre, but now rather than having 2 plies of rubber, we've got 1 ply and a protection layer, which is lighter. We've gone to an aramid bead, so it's folding as you can see, which is lighter again, less stable, but easier to store, and lighter, of course, that's the main reason. But now we've gone down to 4 layers of 240 TPI nylon casing underneath the tread and 3 layers of 180 in the sidewall, saving 350 grams. So that's the tyre of choice for many enduro racers on probably the less gnarly trails. They might even go back to a downhill tyre for some of those races. From the Kaiser down to what I would call a trail tyre, the new Mountain King, so that's the 27.5 by 2.3, and that's lighter again, it's 705 grams with the same TPI as the Kaiser. Now let's look at the lightest on the scale here with the cross-country tyre. So the Race King, a super fast, lightweight cross-country tyre. Rolling resistance is going to be minimal on this. Same TPI again though, 4 layers of 240 underneath the tread, 3 layers of 180 on the sidewall, much less rubber now, we're down to 545 grams, so less than half the weight of one of these downhill tyres. So that's going to be great for cross-country riding. It's going to suit most riders perfectly for that. However, if you're riding rougher terrain, really gnarly stuff, then it isn't going to work like this tyre in that situation. So tyre choice individually for your riding style is going to be super important. And if you are riding rocky terrain, maybe think about going up to a tougher tyre. One final point on tyre choice is that I know some people will choose their tyre going off the weight and actually choose to have a heavier tyre, knowing that for a tough tyre it's going to have to weigh about 1 kilo or even more for the toughest downhill race tyres. So with age, tyres will become more flimsy, and that means that sidewalls can get a bit worn out and move around. And if you puncture and ride that tyre flat, that will also damage it. But also just a case of having less tread on the tyre means there's less material between obstacles and your rim, meaning punctures can happen more often. Right, now to tyre inserts. Now we've seen these sort of appear the last few years, and they're trying to prevent punctures, of course, but these really are aimed at sort of enduro to downhill riders and probably racers more than anyone. But even e-bikes are really great application for these things. They're all trying to fix the same problem in slightly different ways, but one thing they do really offer for racers is the ability to ride even with a puncture. So you see a lot of downhill racers with these, and although they do probably lose a bit of time, they can get to the finish and score valuable points. So we've got things like these Mr. Wolf bangers, we've got Cush cores, we've got Schwalbe Pro cores, you've even got homemade things like pool noodle foam, all trying to stop these problems of getting punctures. So something like a Cush core, you've got that foam material that goes around the tyre, or I'm not quite sure if it is foam, but it's kind of plasticky foam. So that offers damping, so it does affect the ride of the bike as well. And you've got that tunable air pocket, so just like a normal tyre, you can then adjust the pressure in there. So they're said to be able to let you run less pressure in your tyre, and you've still got the stability. That's the same with all these inserts, to be fair. And it just means you've got more material there, again, between your rim and your tyre. So for really heavy riding, downhill racing, that's going to be better for preventing punctures. However, of course, you are adding quite a lot of weight to your wheels. Spinning weight is quite important. However, some of these manufacturers say that you can run a lighter weight tyre, so get rid of your 2 plies and run a single ply tyre in there. It remains to be seen if that actually prevents punctures more than just running a 2 ply tyre. Back in the day when I raced World Cup in the early 2000s, the factory Michelin racers like Steve Peat had these foam inner tubes. So that tube was made of this sort of weird foam that was probably about 5 mil thick, that really didn't hold air very well. You have to pump them up every day, but they did almost stop punctures. You could still pinch them, but they were super good ideas. But a lot of these solutions really are aimed at racers and the heaviest of riders who don't mind adding a bit of extra weight to their wheels. They're probably not going to suit most mountain bikers. Last but definitely not least is trying to make your riding smoother. I'm sure we've all got that friend who rides like a Tasmanian devil, is super heavy on the bike. Jack, I'm looking at you behind the camera, and Blake in fact. They're just aggressive riders and they punish their tyres and they will puncture them. So if you don't mind backing off a level or just trying to be smoother, trying to hop things, trying to be lighter on the bike, that will give you less punctures. Okay, so there's some of my tips for helping to avoid punctures. I'd love to hear yours. Stick them down below, ones I may not have listed there, but also I'd like to know about your homemade contraptions you've made for inserts. My preferred method has always been to run a fairly lightweight tyre. So on this bike, I've just got those Barons, the enduro tyres, and run fairly high pressures, slightly higher than most, but something I've got used to. So I run up to anything like 30 psi, and I've just adapted my riding to it. Maybe not perfect, but that's what I really like to do. Keeps the bike fairly lightweight as well. If you want to see a couple more videos, see Blake hooning a hardtail at Whistler, showing that anything's possible on one of those things, click over there for that one. For Audi 9s by numbers, click up there, hit thumbs up. If you don't like punctures, hit that sub button.